based on some of the information presented and stuff we've been able to look into within the agency, it seems to be somewhere between 2 and 4% of the total notifications statewide. And finally, I think the questions that I'll be asking the board at the end of the day will be, one second, let me find the last slide that we presented. So, we'd like to get some more insight from the board on, one is, what's the board's interest in utilizing the adaptive management process, and or what further information would the board need to move forward, in the sense of like, what are the options for rulemaking? So, once we went through the day today, we had a pretty robust panel back in March. I'd be interested in hearing from the board what you see as the next steps for potential pathways forward on rulemaking, so we can begin to plan for the next board meeting. So, just as we go throughout the day, one of the board members to be able to think about that. So, that's what I got to kick us off. Other than that, I think we're ready to start moving up.
Yeah, I think just one last thing. Again, we've got
in our discussion there in Salem, we talked about having a field tour for this, and now we've made it happen. So thank you for your patience. It's been a while. For rekindling that conversation, just want to thank everybody for taking the time today to do that. We've got a good site. There's a lot of things going on here. We got a team of experts, so let's have a great discussion and invite everybody to lean in with lots of questions and robust discussion. To get us started with what's going on here, Tom's going to talk basically similar to what we talked about in Salem, to bridge in with the dialogue, and then we can go from there. And he'll give us a rundown of the site and the technology that's at work over there. So, Tom Lord.
Okay. So this is the Sugarloafer unit in the Alsea Tree Farm. Mark has maps if you want to see a map. And then Jay is the contractor, so that's his machines over there cutting the unit. You've been tethering for about a year, right, Jay? About in there. So a year into it. And so how tethering works and why we like it at Weyerhaeuser. So the base machine is assisting. It's not pulling the machine down over the hill up. It's just helping it walk up and down the hill under its own power. And the tethering line is helping share the load of that machine. So it essentially is making the machine lighter than it is. And just on flat ground with a machine, the track pressure, since the tracks are so large, it's about as much pressure as standing on 1 foot. That's an equivalent amount of pressure on the ground as a machine like that. The lines also keep the tracks flatter on the ground, so if they were trying to walk up that unassisted, they'd be reared back on the heels of the tracks, but those lines help keep the machine pulled down where the tracks are flat across the ground, which better distributes the force onto the ground. And all equipment, whether tethered or not, travels across a unit by generating shear in the soil. And if that force becomes too great and the soil can't hold it, that's when you start churning the soil together, where you're mixing the soil horizons, and that is what impacts forest or soil productivity. And then at Weyerhaeuser, we train all of our operators every year on our soil protection standards, which a lot of those is preventing that churning action, which tethering helps us achieve. And so I guess the best example and analogy would be if you're trying to walk up a slope unassisted on your feet and it starts getting pretty steep and your feet start churning out from under you, that's the same that happens with those machines. But if someone was to throw a rope down the hill to you and you're pulling with your hands while you're walking, it's significantly easier and your feet don't start sliding out from underneath you. So that's the same example that's occurring in this tethering technology. Another reason why we like it is operator comfort and then stress to the operator. So when every operator I've seen start out tethering, they're pretty nervous to get going. It's kind of a big commitment, that first step over the hill. And so they're nervous when they start, but once they've done it for a week or a month, pretty quickly, it's hard to get them to come off the lines. They like cutting on the lines. The machines are just a lot less tippy than they are unassisted. So once they get used to it, it's easier for the operator and it's hard for them to transition back away from being tethered. And I guess it's less tippy for the operator because the lines effectively lower the center of gravity of the machine, so they're not rearing around in the cab. It's just a lot smoother for them to operate that way. Another reason why we like tethering is the quality of life for the operators. So being a machine operator is a transferable skill. It doesn't really matter what industry. If you want to leave logging where you go, every industry needs a machine operator. And that's not the case for a hand cutter. So in the past, we would have hand cut this entire slope that you can see here. And being a hand cutter is not a super transferable skill. It's really hard on your body. It's the biggest risk profile of any of the workers we use at Weyerhaeuser. So for all those reasons, because you have a transferable set of skills and a better quality of life, it makes it easier to recruit people to become equipment operators in a tethered machine than it is to start somebody out hand cutting. Is that fair to say, Jay?
Yep.
And it's exciting because it's the latest technology. So like a big tour like this, if it was high school and college kids, you say, look at that, that's pretty cool what we're doing there, as opposed to standing across from a set of hand cutters. There's not a lot of those high school and college kids that are going to want to stop what they're doing and become a hand cutter. It's kind of something that's passed down through families. So unless you know a hand cutter personally, it's probably not a career path that people are going to select for themselves. So this just provides more opportunity for recruitment. So I guess with these systems, we blend them in with our more traditional harvest systems that we use. So the hand cutters in this unit, they worked up that draw right below where Ted is cutting now. It was just not somewhere that Ted thought he was going to be able to go. So the hand cutters still have some ground in most of the units. They're working the draws in the rocky areas or wet areas. And so once this is cut, in this example, there's going to be a yarder that comes in and moves all this volume up the hill. But if it was a unit where we were tethered logging the wood either up or down the hill, if there was an area that the operator was uncomfortable, we don't force them to go after that. So it's kind of up to their discretion, and we blend this new harvest system, or this tethering harvest system, in with the other harvest systems. So we're not forcing this technology on ground that it's not suited for. And the final reason why tethering is important to Weyerhaeuser is for the added safety. So in a tethered operation, everybody's in a cab. All the cabs are rated to the OSHA standards for cabs, which is the most stringent in the nation. So if a machine were to go over, which does not happen ever that I can recall, those cabs are rated where they won't deflect more than a certain amount. So the operator is significantly more safe than a hand cutter, like I said, which is a very high risk profile occupation. And it also limits the man hours to complete a cutting job. So this space that you can see to that ridge is about half the unit. This whole unit's 60 acres. That's about 30 acres. With a set of 4 hand cutters, that would probably take 50 man days to complete that job. And with the tether, they're probably 2 to 3 times more productive. So Ted's going to be in there for about 2 weeks on this face that we can see. So it's just a lot fewer man hours, and it's also a significantly lower risk profile for that operator than it would be for a set of 4 hand cutters. So that's an important consideration that we take into account when we're trying to plan out operations. I was going to talk about PFA buffers and the interaction with the tethered machines and the buffers. So there's significantly more buffers in units now under the new rule set than there was previously. And tethered cutting offers better control for the timber up against those buffers. They have better control of the tree as it's going over. They can put it into lead or against lead. If the tree is leaning into the buffer, they can tip it back out and put it down instead of either leaving it or tipping it into the buffer. And then if we're logging with a tethered machine up against the buffer, they can reach in with the boom. They don't have to enter into the buffer and grab a log and then pick it straight up and turn it out of the buffer. So there's less resource damage, then alternatively, if it was with a yarder and they had to pull line side hill over to the buffer and set the turn, they might have to pull it up over the bank to get that turn back out, which could damage resources. Is that fair to say, Nate?
Yeah. Every situation's unique.
Yeah, it's always different. And we tell even the cable guys to try to leave the banks intact as much as they can. But we feel like there's better control available with these tethered systems. And like I said, there's more buffers now than there had been in the past. So there's just a lot more interface between logging up against a buffer. There's a comparison point in the foreground here. So this unit that we're standing in was logged with the old buffer rules, and the unit that they're working in is the new rules. So below us here, this is a small fish buffer. So in the old rule set, that would be a 50-foot buffer. And you can see this draw that I'm pointing to, this side draw. Under the new rule set, that would likely be buffered as an NT buffer. And you can see how narrow this buffer looks when you look across into the new unit. So the two fingers of timber that are going up into the unit are both MPs. The very bottom of the creek of the unit here, that's a small fish, and then where all the draws come together at the confluence at the end of fish. So those two fingers are NT buffers that were not required under the new rule set. So you can just see the comparison from this unit that we logged in 2019 to the unit we're logging now. And then also in this unit that we're standing in, it was a combination of unassisted buncher cutting and hand cutting. So they worked a buncher down this ridge that you can see, and they got down on this flat, they bunched that flat, and then in the draws they hand cut. So they worked that buncher down the ridge. You can see there's not a lot of evidence that they had done that. There's no tracks or gouging. And then if you look across at the new unit, there's a very similar result where it's hard to see impacts to the soil, but we can cut the steeper faces, which we would not have been able to do in the past. And then also in this foreground unit, all this would be hand cut. And if you look across at the new unit, you can see that the operator is putting all the timber into piles. He also, in some cases, has the ability to move that wood side hill into windrows, which then results in fewer yarding corridors. They can just move the wood to where they want lines instead of just having to put lines over every single inch of the unit to pick up all the wood. And then I guess in summary, in traditional logging, each subsequent step, so the logging after the cutting, is dealing with what's left for them. And with this new tethering, or this tethering technology, there's an opportunity to set the next function up for success. So instead of just dealing with what's left, the cutters can actively work to make it better for the loggers. So there's more chances for collaboration and success.
You can actually see the equipment now, barely through the tree.
Oh yeah. So right there in that notch, you can see the cab of the machine. He's working his way back up the hill. When he gets to the top of the hill, he'll likely bump that base machine over and then work his way back down. So that's how they work. You kind of go up and down the hill, working across the hillside.
Tom, can you kind of explain what a base machine is and what it does?
Yeah, so a base machine is either an excavator or a logging shovel, and they install at the manufacturer a drum set behind the counterbalance, and those drums go through a series of shivs on the boom, and then the lines go down the hill very close to the ground, this high typically, and it goes down either one line or two line to a big set of chains, and then those chains anchor to that machine, that green machine that's down over the hill. And so then they talk through radio control, so the operator's not running it, it runs itself. And when he steps on his pedals to walk up or down, those lines either retract to pull him up the hill or play out to let him down the hill. And they maintain a continuous tension, so he can set the tension level that he would want. So he can set it to 20,000 pounds, 40,000 pounds, whatever he feels is appropriate to keep him where he is and help him. but those machines aren't strong enough, the base machines, to turn them up all the way to the max. They won't pull that machine up the hill. So he's always walking under the power of the machine over the side of the hill. It's never being drugged by that base machine. You can't see it. It's up on that upper road is where that base machine is. So they typically put the bucket of the excavator, if it's an excavator, on backwards, and they push it into the ground. So as he's going down the hill and that boom would want to pull ahead, that bucket keeps it from sliding. But it's unmanned. There's nobody in that machine. It's just run off radio controls. Go ahead.
I think before you got the microphone, you might have mentioned something about how these can protect soil health.
Yep.
That tension and how it changes the ground pressure.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so like I said, when they're lowered down over the hill, they're not sliding around, and they're also not churning those tracks or just walking under their own power, being assisted by that upper machine. And it also puts the tracks flatter against the ground, so it's keeping the machine from rearing up on the ends of the tracks. So the tracks are always flat against the ground. And because they're flat, the whole surface area of the tracks are bearing the weight of the machine, which lowers the ground pressure. And there's times that they'll operate tethered on ground that they could work unassisted, both for the operator comfort and to protect the soils, or unassisted machine trying to work its way up the hill. It's quite a fight. They're churning and grabbing stumps and pulling themselves with their boom and really working up the hill. And just the rearing around of that pressure is what would lead to compaction. And also churning, which we train them, is poor or bad for soil health. Good summary, Chad? Cool.
Tom, if you had a road, or I assume you're bringing a yard rig.
Yep.
So it's a yard list. Are you doing shovel logging with it? If you had a road below and that sort of thing, you're actually skidding the logs?
Yeah. So if the unit is set up in such a way that we can tethered log, we will. But on this one, there's no roads in the bottom, so there's poor access. It's very difficult to move wood uphill. You're fighting gravity and also the weight of the logs. So we're going to set a yarder up. The yarder is going to be up on that upper road system, and they're going to choke all those piles and bring them up the hill. In this case.
Have you seen any trend of these anchors getting smaller? Maybe this is a question for your operator.
Tom, will you repeat the question after
Yeah.
Have you seen any trend of these anchors or these base machines? We're seeing that a little bit. Anchors maybe very large. It's very new technology and kind of an uncertainty surrounding that. What was needed? We've seen kind of these very, very large anchors. Is there a trend on the west side for smaller anchors to be used, more single line type winches, etc.?
Yeah, so the question is whether the base machines are getting smaller as the technology advances. And it's kind of up, we leave it up to our contractor's preference. There are new fully automated base machines that do not have a cab. They're not based on an excavator or a shovel. They're a self-contained unit that has no cab. They walk it with a remote control. They turn it sideways and set the blade. We have one of those systems in the Willamette Valley contractor pool up in Molalla. They use it and they like it, but we don't tell our contractors what equipment to buy. But it is trending that way, where it's because you don't need someone in it. Why would you have a cab if you can just have a standalone machine?
Right.
But
yeah, it's my understanding there's been being more comfort with operators, just kind of generally more comfort with operators, more confidence in the machine, and that kind of trend to go to the smaller machines. They're easier to move around, cheaper to move around. Aren't T-winches, is that the name of those kind of T-winches, versus
Yep.
large machines?
yeah, thanks, Joe. The last thing I wanted to talk about is kind of how we get a tethered operation going at Weyerhaeuser. So before any work starts, Weyerhaeuser and the contractor meet to do a pre-work, and we both set expectations of ourselves, what the contractor is expecting Weyerhaeuser to do for a unit and what we expect the contractor to do in a unit. So we meet and discuss those, and we also at that time compare points of concern in the unit. So we'll come and say, there's a wet spot, say at the bottom of that, where the draws all come together, where we're expecting you to cut, and the contractor might come in and say, well, it's really rocky up at the top, so I don't know if I can even get a base machine to the point you're talking about, and we'll come up with the best way to solve the puzzle of the unit. And if it requires more hand cutting than we anticipated, that's fine. And if there's more opportunity to tether than we thought, that's all items we discuss in the pre-work. And currently, all of our best management practices, or BMPs, are described in the plan for alternate practice that we submit to ODF currently. And I saw Mr. Bailey in the back. How do the BMPs, how do we execute on BMPs in the ground? Someone from ODF that looks at our operations. Leo.
Yeah, so just wanted to touch a bit on kind of the process in general that the local district and the stewardship forester assigned to this harvest operation would go through. So obviously the official communication starts with the submission of a notification, but even prior to that, these are folks that we're working with year in and year out, and we typically have a pretty good idea of which units, Weyerhaeuser, I guess in particular, is looking at doing these types of logging systems on. And so we have like I said, a fairly good heads up on where they're looking to apply this technology on the landscape. And so, from there we've had those pre-discussions, and then we'll go through the notification process. And part of why we're looking at this today, right, is talking about the technology and the submittal of the plan for alternate practice, like Tom mentioned. And so that sort of prompts that discussion between the stewardship forester and the company submitting the notification on, what do we need to see in that plan for alternate practice. And those have been in place for quite some time, just as a that conversation and communication piece between the landowner operator and ODF. And so like in this case, David Bailey would be the one, the stewardship forester, to review that with Weyerhaeuser here, and then go through and make sure that we're both comfortable with what's contained in that document. Just kind of speaking in generalities, I suppose, about this logging system and what we've seen over the last number of years within the West Oregon District, and this is regardless of ownership. We've been happy with the outcomes on these operations. From a BMP and forest practices standard point, we're meeting those standards in these cases. And so it's just it's good communication between the local unit office, the stewardship forester of that area, and Weyerhaeuser as a company in this case.
Thanks, man. Yep. So when we're meeting with the contractors and reviewing the BMPs described in the plan for alternate practice, the number one thing we want to do is prevent rutting down through the unit. So we discuss how we're going to achieve that. A lot of times it's achieved as they work their way back up the hill. They will sweep their ruts with a log, or not ruts, they will sweep their trails with a log, and that will knock down any rutting, or it'll hide the trails. So once this is logged, it's very difficult to see typically where those trails up and down the hill were. They clean up as they go. That's a opportunity that's unique to this tethering system. If you was traditional logging and there was some environmental damage in the unit, it's very difficult to mitigate that damage because there's not a machine down there and there's no way to get a machine down there. So kind of what happens is what you get. We do the best we can with hand crews to try to mitigate it. A lot of times it's just too much work where you would need an excavator or a shovel to be down over the side to really fix it completely. The second best management practice we expect our contractors to follow is shutting down an excessive moisture. So in those plans for alternate practice, it describes if it rains such an amount in a 24-hour period, we expect the operator to shut down and not work. And like I said previously, the most limiting factor for this technology is shallow soils where there's either it's really rocky or just the soil's not very deep over the bedrock. It's hard for the tracks to find purchase in a situation like that. And the operators, if they encounter that, typically will either figure out a way around it, but more often they just leave it, and that becomes another area of the unit that we will hand cut as we proceed through the unit. And I would say from all the operators I visit across our region at Weyerhaeuser, our tethered operators are very conscientious. They self-regulate themselves well. And our role at Weyerhaeuser is really just a second set of eyes where we have the opportunity to look at units like this from across the canyon and see things that they can't see from their cab. And we talk as they're working to what they're seeing and what we're seeing to come up with the best result that we can. And all of our operators are AOL professional loggers. That's a requirement to log for Weyerhaeuser. And as professional loggers, they all receive training on SFI, and they all have a qualified person on staff who receives 32 hours of training in environmental protection. I think that's the end of my list. The last thing I was going to say is, as we've done this over the years now, this technology really shows minimal impact through soil compaction on completed units. The units, once you're done and we do the post-harvest on them, after they're planted, it's very difficult to tell where we've operated this technology compared to a unit that's 100% traditionally logged. So at this point, I think I'd pass it off to Parker to talk about soil compaction. Unless there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
So when you start talking about like wet weather procedure in the wintertime when you shut operations down.
Hey Tom, can you give him the mic?
So when you start talking about wet weather and operating during, wet weather events or stopping operations, I guess two questions. How often are you seeing that happen, in the wintertime? Is that a regular occurrence? Is it a rare occurrence? And secondly, how different is that from your more traditional just flat shovel logging? Are the BMPs very similar, I guess?
I guess, Jay, how many days did you shut down last winter because of excessive rain?
I couldn't tell you exactly how many, but
A few?
handful.
A handful of times per winter. And I guess compared to a traditional shovel side, it's very similar. Like if it's wet enough that they can't tether, it's probably not a day that we want to be shovel logging anyway.
So your BMPs, what I'm getting at, your BMPs are fairly similar. Like there isn't a huge difference between a traditional shovel logger than this would be. They're going to shut down the same days, probably.
I think the risk factors per site though are different.
Okay.
And that's what we got to pay attention to on a slope like that can transport water once you have rain starting.
Right.
That's where we're going to be really dialed in with a proactive approach. Sit down with Jay and say, hey, this is what we got going here. This is the areas we're concerned about. What are you concerned about, Jay? And what can we do about it? So you set your stop triggers proactively before you go to work. Right. So the mindset's there that Jay knows he doesn't have to push safety or production over environmental concerns or production over safety concerns. He's fully empowered to make that decision, and we communicate with how we do that. So that's something we're still learning how to do better. I think working together with our operators and leaning on their professional experience helps us do that. So the BMPs are similar, but I think the site hazards can be different that we gotta be careful of.
I had a quick question about leaf trees. So with tethered logging, it should be much safer to work around leaf trees required under the Forest Practices Act. So I'm wondering if you're leaving trees as required under the Act. I guess where are you leaving them? Are you leaving just along the edges?
Yeah, so in this unit over here, all the trees left in the MT buffers are leaf trees. Is that correct, Ross? Yes, it's correct. So we have an excess of leaf trees. Go ahead.
So they're double counted as part of the buffer as well as leaf trees?
They're double counted under state law. So they're both buffer trees and leaf trees.
I think that meets the intent. But
Yeah, and I guess with the new buffers, the new FPA buffers that we are operating to now, there is an excess of leaf trees in almost every unit. Is that fair to say, Nate?
Yeah, I mean, the rules spell out pretty clearly what qualify as leaf trees and what don't qualify as leaf trees, and most of the additional buffering that we do the trees that are left in those additional buffers under rule can be counted towards your required 2 per acre for the harvest unit. So, yep, it's there's a, just speaking from observation, there is a tremendous increase in the amount of overall trees on the landscape under the new rules. So I'm just, in the few years that we've been doing it, I see a lot more just out on the landscape. Here you go.
I just want to make a point, and then I'll just let this go, but leaving trees scattered across the clear cuts provide values for quite 3 different species of wildlife that would not recognize value in the trees when they're left in their exposed to camping stands. And so I appreciate that it's much easier to work around trees when they're together, but from a habitat standpoint, it's not quite the same.
It was common to leave trees next to the buffers under the old rules.
Dave Boyd, in a previous life, I worked for another timber management organization, and one thing that we recognized with the ability for machines on the slopes is the ability to create short snags, which directly works towards having a scattering of trees, because you're down there with a machine, you can see a tree that has some defect, you can reach up and you can create that structure on the landscape for wildlife that the hand faller just really can't reach up 25 feet and nip a tree off and make a short snag for you.
Absolutely, and I've seen that especially on starker land, but I guess I'm not seeing it here, so yeah.
And one of the reasons why we picked this site for you all today is to look at the mosaic around you also. There's quite a mosaic of different age classes in this, and there's actually, different ownership patterns in here that's contributing to that, but it's a very diverse site as well, and we definitely wanted to highlight that as we were taking in the tether logging as well. And additionally showing you the comparison between the old buffering to the new buffering, where we're leaving a significant amount more trees on the landscape to protect sensitive features.
I'm not going to ask you a fair question, but I'm asking you anyway, Mark. We talked about the impact of the PFA, like financial impact on landowners, and we've all, what is that number? What is that number? On this site, I think it's probably pretty high. What would you say the percentage financial impact? 60-acre unit? You can probably do some quick math in your head. I don't expect a number, but from a percentage basis, I'm struck by this one is probably fairly high financial impact.
Yeah, and starting maybe boring into that financial question of why we do what we do anyhow, it doesn't start with finances, but it leads there because we're a company that needs cash to continue to do what we love to do, and our shareholders expect us to produce that for them. But Weyerhaeuser is celebrating 125 years of being in business this year, and we didn't do that by degrading the environment we're working in. Tether assist logging that you're looking at and the extension of the PFA rules are just the next genre of sustainability that we have signed up for willingly, to say we're going to give away that financial side of it in order to make sure we maintain our social license to operate and also do the right thing here on the landscape. Now, is everybody going to agree if it's enough? Probably not. But what you're looking at is an organization that says we're going to do something, and here's what our contribution is, and it is significant, very significant. Parker, do you want to talk about any of the technology or the work you guys are doing in Oregon State? Do we need to steady you while you got a microphone in your hand? You want me to hold this for you?
Nah, I got it. I'm steady enough at this point. Just if anybody was wondering, no, I did not screw up my leg out in the woods. Did something else dumb. So no worker safety complaints there. My name, once again, is Parker Turk. I'm at OSU in the College of Forestry, and I work in Dr. Woodham Chung's research lab. I think most of you either met or heard him speak on some of the research that the College of Forestry is working on. Reason I'm here today, specifically my research, is soil impact studies with these tethered logging systems. And a few key points I wanted to both reiterate and then add my own, because Weyerhaeuser did a great job of mentioning the soil protections and the monitoring that we're doing to make sure that we're not damaging the environment. What we're seeing right now in the scientific literature is that there is almost no difference in the impact in between conventionally accepted logging systems and these new tethered systems. On top of that, the flexibility and the ability that we're giving our operators to work more strategically around sensitive areas. We're seeing improved stand conditions, and sometimes we're even seeing slightly improved soil conditions in certain areas. Obviously, this is one tool in a larger tool set because forest management is very adaptive. It's very situational. The forester's favorite answer: it depends. So when you look at a stand, you're going to find something different. On top of that, not only are we monitoring for stuff like changes in bulk density and rooting potential, which so far we've seen no degradation in those numbers. The overland flow and erosive potential are also a grave concern. And good news is over multiple sites across Oregon and even including other states in the U.S., research done outside of OSU, we've seen little to no increase, and in some cases no erosive potential at all. I know my site, one of the sites that I've been working on in Eastern Oregon, it's a very, very sandy, ashen soil, tons of erosive potential, especially because these aren't super well hydrated soils. So when they get a flash of hydration, they want to move. They had like a once in 30-year storm dump like 3 months worth of water on my site in about 2 days, and we saw no erosion that was of any concern. I think the longest rill we were able to measure, and this is one rill on a 600-foot corridor, was like maybe 2 or 3 feet long, and we didn't see any deposition down below the stand into the road or into the culvert system or down into the streams. So, like Tom said earlier, these machines, they actually can have really light touches on the landscape, and the research so far, as we're continuing to build that body of research to make sure that we're exploring every avenue and being very cognizant of what we're doing with these beautiful natural resources we're so lucky to manage. What we're seeing so far, that these operators, especially once they get time on tether, they're able to work very efficiently and intelligently and protect these resources for ourselves and for future generations. So I think that's just about my spiel if anybody has any questions.
How long have you been doing this site monitoring?
So I'm been a grad student now for just under 2 years, but I've been working with Woody for a little over 3. And so for most of these sites, we're doing pre and post monitoring, and then 1 and 2 year posts, depending on the site. So I know one site that I visited, past grad students, or I've visited a couple of those. One, we went back and we checked the soil erosion fences. We were 3 or 4 years post, and there was nothing in them. For the actual soil sampling, there's a site out in Idaho, the Greenhorn study. I think we did 3 years of sampling on that, and the relationships we saw, especially with bulk density and erosion, nothing of concern, if not slightly improved conditions situation. Mark, you had a question?
I'm going to let Jay have the opportunity to have a microphone.
Oh, yeah.
He can talk about our framework and how he goes about it from a contractor perspective. Shed a little more light on the topic.
Not real good at speaking from people, but we do a pre-work on every job. I have a safety consultant also that comes out. We just talk over everything we need to on the jobs. As far as cutting with the traction line, their assist, it really helps a lot, even on 20% ground, 15%, you're not spinning, not tearing up the ground. Helps you around really well. No, turn up. Ted likes running it even when he's hooked up on flat ground, just because it keeps the machine down. It's not rocking. It gets around really well.
What's the investment in a machine like this or a system like this? Ballpark.
The buncher that's down below is new, and it was $803,000, and the tethers around 4, give or take, depending on when you're buying. Yeah, 2.
You've operated tethers.
I've done a little bit, not as much. Ted's done most of it. He's pretty good at what he does.
Just from a safety standpoint, do you worry about Ted as much as you do your hand covers?
No, it's safer. Their hand cuttings are just so many, it's not exact science, and there's so many things you gotta worry about, watch for. And that's what safer tethering than hand cutting.
Thanks, Jay. Kind of put you on the spot there, so appreciate that. So back in March, we talked about one other thing, I think near the conclusion of the meeting, around where does the innovation go next? You don't do this if this becomes overregulated and we move away from it. We don't have an opportunity to grow. And in the van, we were talking, just as we arrived here, as we were mingling, there was a thought brought up about, well, where else can this system be used outside of what it's doing today or what you're seeing doing today? This thing you get on slopes and build fire line. You know, so the technology can be adapted in a lot of different places now that our Oregon loggers know how to use it. It can be put in play in a lot of different spots. The other thing is the numbers are in, Joe. This unit, 60-acre unit, 22% of it's buffered. So just to give you a comparison of the commitment that was made against a comparison of this one, it's significant. Some units it might be a magnitude if you're leaving more than 10% more than you were under the old rules.
I'll be quick because there's a lot of good information been rolled out. I'm Dave Boyd with Associated Oregon Loggers, and I'm primarily here as the insurance manager, and we deal with the workers' compensation insurance for the vast majority of Oregon loggers. And the simple truth is the rate to put someone in a cab and do that job is a fifth. The rate to have someone outside the cab doing the same thing. Another thing I like to bring up is we all see the challenges of finding people that want to go to work. One of those, the onset of that machine starting in about 2015, I think staved off a crisis in our industry of not having enough people that were willing to come to work. So that really does two things, and I get the accident reports come across my desk every morning throughout the state. And the people outside the cabs are having struck-bys, and they're bad. The people that are running these machines, if anything at all, are falling off them, which is no different than any other machine, or they get their pinky finger caught in the door. And those are not life-threatening injuries, and that's just been amazing to see the transformation of these systems on the landscape. Any questions from a safety or workers' compensation perspective? And I gotta say, I brought my trading cards, if anybody wants a trading card for timber faller. This is actually me 5 years ago, and I can talk with knowledge about fallen trees because I did that all the way through graduate school and then again during the pandemic. Mark, are you going to wrap us up?
One question. Translate the 1/5 difference in rate in a human sense. So that means there's one injury in X if you're in a machine versus on the ground.
So the question is the 1/5 difference, and tethered operations are lumped into the greater mechanized operations. So it's not a true one-to-one tethered falling versus timber falling, because timber falling is also lumped into the non-mechanized, not otherwise categorized, which could be anybody from a thinner to a choker setter. So there's no comparison to the safety of a guy in that cab versus a guy carrying a chainsaw out there, but the way the workers' compensation rules and class codes, which are set nationally, apply, those are the two codes that are used. That answer your question?
Yeah, more or less. My point was that, you know, this technology is saving people.
Absolutely.
And it's absolute.
And you can say too that it's not just saving people in the short-term struck buys, it's saving worker happiness in the longevity of a career, because operating a machine over a career doesn't provide the kind of injuries and limps that us old timber cutters have, right? Along the lines of the new technology of draping wrappers, every truck driver that is a truck driver for so long ends up with a shoulder injury because of repetitive motion. Every timber cutter is going to have some issues because of repetitive motion. Thank you.
I'm not on the agenda, but I just wanted to say a couple things. I'm Jerry Workman with Weyerhaeuser Company, and I think this is a great story to see and tell. I mean, you look at the buffers of what they were and what they are now, and that's significant. And are we having an impact on the stream? In my estimation now, I would say no. I mean, look at that buffer on that area now. That's a great story to tell. Also, tethered logging has become a preferred method for all loggers and landowners. And we use it wherever we can because of that. Not only the safety, the production, and the environmental has shown that it is a viable method to use. And most of the loggers today have it as a tool in their toolbox to use where they can and when they can. And if they can't, then they go back to the old methods, which are higher risk, putting the guy on the ground to hand cut it. But where we don't have to, we don't do it. And our contractors prefer that as well. So I think that's a great story, a great thing to look at and to see what the future is. And I look forward to what is in the future if we're doing this today. So anyway, thanks.
Can I say one thing?
I just want to point one really cool thing out that you can take forward as you're driving around the Coast Range of Oregon. If you take a look at what we're seeing here, you can see, especially on that little spot, not where he's working right now so much because that one's a little bit harder to see, but on the one on the left, you can kind of see where the trees are bunched up. You can see them kind of in bunches, and this, I just want to make sure this was well understood because it's something you can look for as you look at harvest units driving around the state and you see something happen and you see a harvest unit. If you see trees that are bunched in groups like that, you're looking at a tethered operation on a hillside, that is. Because you can't put trees in a bunch like that unless you have equipment. And that is one of the keys of a tethered system. And so I just want to make sure that's clear so that as everyone's driving around Oregon on your own, just thinking about these things, you'll see one and you'll say, oh, that's a tethered system. Now I get it. That's one of the things that tethered can do. I also just want to underscore what Josh said this morning. What is the percentage of notifications that have tethered operations associated with them, Josh?
I think in the way we track it is maps, but there's like 3 to 4%.
3 to 4%.
5 to 100, some lower hundreds there, but it's very.
Right. So 3 to 4% of the notifications, and I think that's important too. Just to understand the context, we're focused on tethered today and talking about the value of tethered and how it works. But make no mistake, we still need conventional operations, right? And so it's a balance. And sure, I think everybody projects that tethered systems will grow as people get more used to them and operators invest that very heavy investment cost of getting a tethered system. But I don't think it's ever projected to really take over. It's just going to always be a really important component. But still, conventional logging is really important for us to maintain. So just wanted to make those points.
Thanks, Seth. We can take further questions if you want. Continue the conversation. That's been a good one.
We need to be on the bus in about 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Thanks, Mr. Timekeeper. Way to go, Jeff. I guess on a personal note, growing up in Eastern Oregon, small community, timber-based community. 2017, working for Weyerhaeuser, I became the person that got to go out and investigate typically contractor fatalities, employee fatalities as well, across the nation. So in that total, I've investigated 12 people who didn't go home at night. They stepped off their front porch and thought they would get home to their family and friends in the evening, and they didn't. Tragic. So part of my role is not only figure out why that happened, what we can do to make it sure it doesn't happen again. I've seen that tragedy ripple through our small communities, particularly in Oregon. And I'm determined to do something about it. in 2014, I had an opportunity to start this technology in Southwest Washington, in Chinook, Washington, was the first trial. I wasn't a believer then, I am a believer now, and to Randy's point, it saves lives. And once you see the impact of a community member not coming home at night in a small place like Eddyville, it's tragic. This technology makes sure that we get that operator home safe every night. And to me, that means something personally, and I know it means something to my organization to make sure we're doing that from not just the sustainability of the wood flow process, but of the people side of it. We don't have people out here doing this. We just got growing trees, and America needs lumber to build those homes. So to me, that's the personal part of it that really motivates me to continue to innovate and make this safer and better as we go forward as well. So appreciate everybody's attention today and enduring a long trip to the top of this hill. And thanks for the questions and the thoughtfulness in your contribution. Oh, we got one more back here.
Real quick, there was one band, there only had one person.
In Starker Forest, my name is Jeff Minter. I'm the Vice President of Operations, Timber Manager for Starker Forest. Been here 31 years. And I'd have to ask Matt from Miller, but I believe we've been tether, cut to length thinning for 5+ years now on our ownership. Similar concepts to what we were looking at in the cutting machines from the last stop. A little bit different system. Both machines have winches mounted on the machine themselves, so they anchor to a tree and they let themselves up and down the hill instead of having a separate machine pull them up and down the hill. Well, assist them up and down the hill, sorry. These systems allow us to get on a little more ground with the cut to length. We're shooting to thin around age 30. We're planting 360 to 400 trees to the acre. In our first thinning operation, we're taking about half of that out. So we're trying to leave 200 trees. Our program is we'll come back in and thin again at around somewhere between 40 and 50. And our end goal is to have around 140 trees at final harvest age of 60. So this is a tool that really helps us get the kind of tree we want, the trees per acre we want. And it's really good, as we talked about, it's really good on the ground. If we didn't have the tether ability, we would be yarder thinning this, which is a great system as well. It's harder and harder to find cable thinners, and because it takes 6 or 8 people, and they'll do about half in a day what these 2 guys will do. So those are very rough numbers, but it's in that neighborhood. And also when we're yarder thinning, we like to go a little older, so we get a long log. So if you can see here, we're cutting these all to short logs, and you're handling them manually like you do on a yarder system. That's an awful lot of pieces to handle. Ecologically, we can go around things with this system. When you cut cable corridors, they have to be straight, or you scar the rest of your trees up when you're yarding. These systems, we can favor one species or one size of tree or a wet area. Just the list is long of things that you can favor with this system. I know you guys are all going to watch this as he heads off down the hill. So. We can run on. Matt will probably cover this better than me, but we can run on some pretty steep slopes with these. Micro, short little spans can really push the steepness limit. There's ground in this unit that they don't need to tether when we get on down the road, but this bulk in here that we started on their tether is the vast majority. Any questions on any of that? Anybody got a quick question for me before I pass it off to the talking about the system? This system can be used in clear cut, like Trey was saying. So, and it is used in clear cuts in the south. And we've actually used it on.
disadvantage. What this does, though, is if we decided to create a tailored prescription here, this system can work around and you can pick better tree selection, spacing's better than you can with conventional tower or cat operations. So.
And if you crowd right up to the edge, you can see the machine that's down here below me cutting. If you want to walk up here while I'm passing this off to Matt. Matt Mattiota's with Miller Timber. I have no idea what his title is anymore. Matt and I are actually buddies from college. He was a groomsman in my wedding, and I wasn't his, so we've known each other a couple days.
Yeah, so everything's fair game since we know each other that long.
I was nice.
You were nice. You okay? Got a fever?
No.
Okay. Good afternoon, Matthew Mattiota, Senior Vice President and Chief Forester, Miller Timber Services. Welcome to our thinning operation here at Starker Forests. We are the largest operator of cut to length in all of North America. 54 machines scattered across the country. The vast majority of them have tether capabilities like this. We don't always use tether all the time, but we do use them when needed. So benefits to this is it's just the 2 machines, no additional third machine needed for tethering systems. And then the tether we only use where we need it. So we can go down the hill here, it just drops off pretty hard, but a lot of times if it's broken ground, we'll start tethering from where we need it. We don't have to have the second machine to do that. So in thinning prescriptions, we do a lot of work in the Forest Service too, where they're doing restoration thinning, and they're not able to get roads in or get machines in certain places, and it is thinning, so it's really handy in that regard because we can go thin from tether from where we need to. It is a little lower tension than the systems you saw earlier because the base machines here do about 80-90% of the work. And why that is you've got 8 wheels with flexible bogies and track and those tracks that are on there, so these machines conform to the land. And they have a high amount of adhesion to start with the planetary gears in those bogies to keep the wheels firmly planted. So it truly is traction assist. It is not we don't need it for stability, it's purely traction aid. So if something was to happen, we just wouldn't go anywhere. Pretty common system, was developed in Europe in right around 2010 or so. It was an aftermarket deal at that point in time. Some guys out of Switzerland started this. They were using cable yarding systems, and labor costs and things were getting higher, and so guys were starting to figure out how they could get on steeper slope. So they've been using it in Europe for a long time now. These systems are put on at the Ponce factory in Vierma, Finland. They are designed to be with the system, so it's sold as a package with the system. It's not an aftermarket system, it's part of the package. So their engineering support supports it from the base machine on up. Little thing about cut to length and why it's so popular, it is the dominant harvesting system in the rest of the world. Somewhere, we're getting close to 60% of all wood harvested by volume now is cut to length. North America is the last holdout. The U.S. South holds tremendous promise for it, and I'll be down there next week for a big seminar on that. And it also is going to play really well into robotics and AI down the road because there's only 2 machines involved. It also has the lowest carbon footprint of any mechanical harvesting system in the world. 2 operators, like Jeff said, make up our operation here. The forwarder will load the truck. The truck will pull up next to it. He'll just take it out of the pile, put it right on the truck. So when we tether, it's a static line system. You'll see here maybe a difference than the other systems you saw is this line isn't moving. It's static. It comes out of the machine, just like kind of like a spider descending from the hill, or from the door jamb in your house or something. You see it just kind of descends down and then goes back in. So the line doesn't move. This allows us to do some other things, especially in thinning. We can hang a block off the stump and we can pivot and turn corridors and change directions because that line is static. We'll just use it as a pivot point at that point. And we do that occasionally. We've had up to 3 pivot points before. It does cut into productivity when we do that. We've used this system extensively in Colorado. We've had some spots where we were tethering about a half a mile. And we tethered off of areas that did not even have an anchor point. Up at the top of the hill, we actually descended from above tree line down into timber in a watershed to remove dead timber before it burned out.
Anchor on.
We anchored on, well, there was none on the top of the ridge, so we found the first thing we could anchor on, which was knobcone pine. Makes a great tether point. The difference here is we're at maximum 10 metric tons of pulling force on these machines, so not a lot compared to other systems because the base machine does most of the work. There's about 1,200 feet of line roughly on the machines in this version. Newer versions coming out, probably going to have more. And we've been able to do different techniques where we can tie machines together and go down the hill, or unhook and rehook mid-slope and come back up. So we've kind of got some techniques to get us a little further down the hill than that 1,200 feet. It works pretty well. You know, we first got these machines in 2015, and most of the fleet now all has it. We even have some, for fuels reduction projects, we even had some forwarders like the one you see down over here, where we took the bunks off, and we've actually got wood chippers built onto the back of that forwarder for slash reduction, and we blow the chips out across the forest, even tethered. So in WUI situations, we use that a lot in Colorado to reduce the fuel loading. The other thing you'll see here, really common for these operations, is we walk on the slash mats. Pretty important part of our operation is walking on the slash mat for soil protection and nutrient recycling. We pretty much do it most everywhere we're at. Sometimes we don't, depending on what specific landowner objectives are, and we'll maybe pile off the side or pack slash around. But we do like to walk on the slash mat. Interesting thing about these machines, fully tethered, even that forwarder, which is capable of carrying 22 metric tons of wood, still less than 10 psi ground pressure, fully loaded. Without the winch. With the winch it's less, because we're going to transfer some of that back up to the stump. So really low ground pressure, less than a mountain bike. Makes it ideal ideal tool for sensitive soils. We've done some stuff in the U.S. South, non-tethered, on flat ground that's super soft. Because the machines have high flotation, it lets us do that kind of work. The great thing about it for us is the winch being on the machine allows for a lot of operational flexibility to treat stands that maybe we would normally not be able to get the whole stand. So when we're looking at holistic treatments on watershed level basis, it allows us to do that, and it saves in moving costs because you've only got the two machines to move in. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about Miller and how many sites you have?
Yeah.
Just a little bit more about that.
So, like I said, we're the largest operator in North America. So there's 54 cut-to-length machines in the system. We have a lot of operations in California. Matter of fact, we have operations thinning. This is our third year thinning in Redwood National Park, of all places, for the Save the Redwoods League, doing conservation work with those machines. So we have industrial customers, we have National Park Service, lots of work for the Forest Service. These machines do go to fires. We have a whole bunch of them on fires. Matter of fact, there are 14 of them at the Dragon Bravo fire, the north rim of the Grand Canyon right now. We also have water tanks that go in the back of these forwarders with 2,640 gallons of water. We can pack them all across the unit. And we have monitor cannons we use to fight fire with. So all of our folks here are red carded, and we do go to fires. Lots of operations in Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, California. We do a lot of ski work in ski areas. So this is year 6 of thinning in Sun Valley, Idaho. Thinning the ski run, between the ski runs in Sun Valley, Idaho, that is a very, that mountain is very, very popular. There's some very, very rich and influential people that put a lot of eyes on that. So aesthetics are highly important to what we do because it is their mountain. So we work for a variety of clients. We do a lot of work in Colorado for municipalities and watersheds, doing watershed fuels treatment work. The city of Colorado Springs told us for every $1 they spend in fuels mitigation work, it saves them minimum $7 post-fire just for their water treatment facilities alone. So for them, this is a huge deal. So they actually have bond measures and are treating landscapes anywhere inside of their domestic city watershed, whether it's GNA work or on their private lands. So in other parts of the country where we do work, it's not necessarily due to the value of the timber, it's other values at risk. We've done work for watershed alliances. In the U.S. South, it's industrial timber production. So a variety of customers that you're wanting us to talk about. We do a lot of work in California for Sierra Pacific. We thin their properties all across the Sierras. A variety of clients. So depending on what the client's objectives are, is how we utilize these tools. So they're very flexible in that regard.
And Matt's only got about 2 more minutes, so if you got questions for him, chime up.
By the way, questions for me. I can tell you one more thing before that. We do a lot of work with research with Oregon State. And there he is, right? Parker's here. We hired one student who did his grad work on interaction with these machines, doing work with Parker. We've done work with Humboldt State. We've done some work with the University of Georgia. just wrapping up. It'll be published soon. A study out of the Rocky Mountain Research Station of the U.S. Forest Service on these machines on steep slopes in Colorado and dead spruce stands, working on granitic soils and what that looks like. As a hydrologist we've worked with there, it's a 5-year study. Should be ready to publish that pretty soon. Pretty good results, pretty interesting. So, they have direct results of what happened, no treatment, and rainfall levels immediately. A big fire, our work, same rainfall events, same time frame, and what the impacts were. So that'll be really interesting to look at. Yes, sir.
We had a question. Are both sets of tires drive tires?
So the question was, do both sets of tires drive? The answer is yes. All 8 wheels are driving. So when I talked about the base machine doing most of the work, that's because everything drives. And if you look, the machine flexes in the middle, it articulates, and the bogies articulate. So it's conforming to the land rather than a rigid structure. This thing conforms to the land, and so it maintains a high level of adhesion because of that. That's why the base machine does most of the work. Great question.
Any other questions for Matt before we turn it over to Amanda?
Questions? Okay, here's Amanda.
All right, hey guys, my name is Amanda Sullivan-Astor. I'm the Forest Policy Manager for Associated Oregon Loggers. So you heard from earlier today, we represent all of the forest operators in the state, so those that do the cutting, the logging, the yarding, the fuels treatments, the reforestation, firefighting, really any contracted service out in the woods. Those are the folks that we represent, including Miller and Jay Mulberry, who you saw earlier today. So both of those folks are our members. And as a forest policy manager, I do a lot of policy, as you can imagine, but I also run our scholarship program and our workforce development program. And so within that, we actually got and advocated and lobbied for a study on forest workforce, and that concluded in July this year. And one of the biggest findings of that study, just looking at the forest management workforce across all parts of the sector, private and public, as well as the operations side, so all the contracted services. What the contractor found, and what the higher education coordinating committee found, is that we need 3,400 individuals every year, annually, coming into this sector because of attrition and retirement. And so there's a huge workforce need in this sector just to keep what we're seeing happen at the current capacity and production that we have. So when we think about landscape hazards and wildfire, the need is significantly higher than that. So in order to actually increase the capacity for the sector, we're going to need to utilize great technologies like you're seeing here today into our operations. Every year, we're going to use that in order to be effective at spacing CSCs that we have across the state. So it's a critical workforce development opportunity for us, and really critical. And one of the ways that we are trying to address that is partnerships with more state universities. So at OSU, there's a simulator lab. So just down the hall, more or less, from where we were at yesterday, and it's there's a great partnership there where they're trying to train students to learn how to operate these types of machines without having to run the risk of bringing them directly out to the field. And so it's a great learning opportunity, not only for foresters as they work with operators, but actually the school has actually developed some micro-credentials and certificates through a grant with the Higher Education Coordinating Commission Future Ready Oregon program that AOL and some
his path eventually will probably be a project manager, but the simulator has given him a good foundation which to understand how the machines work, and then take those skill sets and go into the field and practice them, and then that in turn is going to make him a better field project manager down the road, actually having operating equipment and knowing what the capabilities are. So we're involved with OSU on that. We've also done some work with Shasta College in California, the same program. I did think of one other thing with the machines that I didn't talk about earlier, and that is emergency response besides fire. We were contracted, did some work this spring for the Army Corps of Engineers, hurricane cleanup after Hurricane Helene. So we dropped those metal tracks, run rubber tired, running roads and cleaning up, protecting communities. We'll switch that. And we also, in the machines in the U.S. South for the hurricane cleanup, we switched and put a bio-based hydraulic oil in the machines, and they actually had us in the water courses removing debris out of the water courses that would to prevent them from backing up onto bridges and pipes and further devastating communities. So I like to call these things my Finnish Army knife because they're not from Switzerland. The winch is, but so it's my Finnish Army knife. We use it for a variety of things.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, I'm going to give the mic back over to Parker, who's going to talk a little bit more about the labs and innovations that OSU is working on in the sector, not just tethered and the work that he's doing, but some of the other things that are really interesting. And in talking with Matt in preparation, they do have Starlink in some of these machines. So thinking about the safety piece, the safety piece is not just being able to directionally fell and be safe and in a cab when you're harvesting, but it's also having that connectivity and the connectability into the network through things like Starlink and technology that's inside of the cab. So Parker's going to talk a little bit more about that too.
All right, thank you, Amanda. Yeah, so I'm Parker once again from OSU. Really, this tethered technology is really exciting for a little bit closer. Not drop the crutches and fall down and embarrass myself. Goodness gracious. So these tethered machines are really an exciting test bed for new technologies. A number of projects are being worked on at OSU and in partnerships with private industry. Some of the interesting things that we're working on, not only for operator safety, but also to make sure that we're working as intelligently as we can in the woods. Especially talking about that Starlink, we're trying to increase the connectivity of our forest managers, our operators, our mills, to make sure that across the supply chain we have clear and consistent communication and the information that we're providing is accurate. So some of the things that we're doing is we're developing heads-up display systems for the cabs of the machines using LiDAR and AI to kind of identify trees, active measurements, also using that connectivity and that heads-up display to provide our operators with real-time prescriptions instead of having to send out marking crews who are now in the canopy on their feet, tiring themselves away and putting themselves in danger. Instead, we can use LiDAR stand maps and other information and mill cut sheets, and then we can provide the operators visual indicators for which trees to take. Obviously, operator discretion will still be involved, but this is one way that if say the mill has a certain sort that they were looking for last week, but now they're overloaded on it, now you can update those cut sheets and your decision trees based upon stand info from LiDAR and cruise data. Some other things that we're trying to do to increase that connectivity between both the operators and the end users of these timber materials, we're trying to implement scanners into some of our felling machines' cutting heads, so that not only are we getting the actual rough timber lengths and diameters, we're also getting an insight into what wood quality looks like based upon things like ring counts and late wood ratios, because that's also something important to keep track of for the mills. Basically what we're trying to do is use the material that we're taking more intelligently so that our utilization rate not only in the woods for the machinery is as high as it possibly be, it's also increasing utilization rate of the products that we are removing from the landscape. Other things that we're looking into for workforce safety, we've got research into the actual stress factors of operators inside these machines. We're still in the early stages of discovery and working out solid methodology for how to quantify operator stress, but looking at things like heart rate and
vision, what items they're focusing on, sweat, stuff like that, as well as some exoskeleton research as well, looking out for those who still have to manually fall timber, making sure that we're supporting important joints. It's kind of hard to list everything that the college is doing because there's so many great people doing great things. But those are kind of the highlights of the new technology we're trying to bring into the woods. And it's really important for us as researchers to ensure that our industry partners, our operators, have the leeway to experiment with these new technologies so we can support our current forestry practices and then also look forward to see what forestry will look like in the future.
Great, thanks Parker. Jeff, do you have something else or?
Any last questions or comments on the cut the length fitting that it?
It's Randy's fault. He told me I need to say something. So if you look on the end of some of the logs, you'll see a little color mark on there. So that's a color marking system that's on the head of the harvester. And so what it does is we have two colors available, a red or a pink and a blue. And so we program the machine up for some specific dimensions or attributes of those logs. And so as they fall past the harvesting head, there's a little sprayer in there that puts that little color mark on the end of it. So it'll be red and blue or no color. And we can use that for differentiating species, diameter, length, quality, a variety of issues. And it's an alcohol-based color mark. And so it's good for like up to 32 below. Since these machines are from Finland, it's not very warm there in the winter, so they got to have something that works. So that's what those color markings are on these machines. The other thing that's interesting is the machines learn, they have AI in them. So we're talking about technology. They learn the form class of all these trees. And they learn and throw out data as they move across the hillside. So optimization of these trees is done with AI. So we program values according to lengths and diameters, and that machine is trying to find the highest value it can out of these stems as it feeds it through. So within the first 3 feet of feeding that stem through, it's running through calculations so fast you can see it on the screen, calculations of how to merchandise this thing. Now, maybe OSU and the guys that over there will come up with ways for it to get machine vision to see the defects. It can't see the defects, but it's doing it based on diameters and learning the diameters and how fast the trees taper by species. So it calculates everyone individually based on species. And it's very, very good at getting, one forester for a larger company told me, he goes, you get a squeal out of the pig, right? So you get all the value you can out of this thing. So if we're given a top size to hit and we got enough length combinations, we can get down to within a half an inch or less of minimum top size to whatever that value product is. So it's very, very good at that. The reason why is in Finland, they're 80% forested. It's about the size of California. There's over 100 mills in that space. Sustainably harvested for generations. They're continuing to grow more than they harvest, but they don't have many other resources in their economy. So what they've said is we don't have metals, we don't have oil, we don't have a lot of farming, but we were given, God gave us trees. And so we're trying to get the maximum out of these things we can for value. And so that's what they're doing. They're squeezing the value out. So that's part of that color marking process.
Machine vision is part of that.
So machine vision is part of the heads up. It's coming, and then I've written in a hybrid forwarder over in Finland. We're the first ones designated to get one here in North America in probably about 2 years now. So it'll be about 30% less fuel consumption than this current one. It runs on all electric, and then just a little generator comes on when it needs to recharge. So the technology is advancing to minimize impacts every day.
All right. Are there any other questions from folks in the audience about the material you've heard today? Okay, then I think I'm going to pass it off to Josh.
All right. So just want to remind folks the scope again for the rulemaking. So generally, tethered logging fits within the Forest Practices Act rules on the majority of the landscape. There are 2 places within 100 feet of a stream channel and also on HLHL with non-downslope public safety risk that we've been requiring a plan for alternate practice for. So just to set the stage, that's the focus of the current rulemaking. So what I wanted to do was follow up and kind of ask the board what they may desire as the next steps. Statute provides a couple of options. If the
board feels like it needs more information, the adaptive management program is an option to gather more scientific data if we need to. If the board feels like they have a good handle after a tour and panel presentation, that they have enough to go on, we can bring a couple options back at a future board meeting that can range from adding components to the rule to maybe clarifying the rule, or maybe the board having a policy position how they clarify tethered logging fits into the rule. I think there's a wide range of spectrum of things that could fit in there. So I wanted to offer that up today, so as we return to the next meeting, we can bring back something fruitful for the board to begin making decisions on and move this process forward. So if any of the board members have a strong sense today, I'd like to hear that as we begin planning for the next board meeting. So I was going to open it up to the board members to kind of share and maybe provide some input, or we'd bring that back for a decision at a future board meeting. So,
if we were to give the Adaptive Management Committee a question, what is that timeline? Okay. If we were to give a question to the Adaptive Management Committee, what does that timeline look like? Because it sounds like they're pretty busy.
we would have to frame, if there's an interest, if there's interest in the timeline for the Adaptive Management Committee, that would be part of our staff work to work with them and frame up what that looks like. So if you're truly interested in that route, and that's what we would bring back as part of the information. So I want to be able to focus staff in the right direction because there's several different pathways that we could take here.
So Josh, thanks. I guess for me as a board member, I'm very comfortable with this. Not surprising, I've been around it quite some time, and I think the industry itself has been doing this, quite some. It's new, but it's not new, right? This is being used around the world. You talked about Europe, New Zealand, where this technology is being used, and I think what we saw today, the BMPs that were being used currently, is very effective, right? So I guess, from my perspective as a board member, I don't know that this would be something we would want to move in adaptive management. I think we would want to move straight to rulemaking. That's my 2 cents.
Ben Dormling here. This has been a fantastic tour, and obviously you guys have put on a really good show. And I mean, our meeting we had in March was fascinating. Today was fascinating, and I think what we've seen is two of the very, very well-respected landowners, some very well-respected operators doing really good work here. And I haven't seen anything that causes me concern that feels like, oh, we need to uncover a lot more. But I also don't know. What I've seen seems pretty rosy, but life is not usually one-sided. Things are usually more complicated than they might appear. And I guess I would just sort of, as I'm mulling this over, like, if we expand this on to everybody, other landowners, other operators who don't have as much experience with this, who don't have that trust and respect to really dig into their DMPs, what do we need to be figuring out to put in that rule package, put in that guidance package to make this replicable across the states, across all ownerships and operators, so that we can see what we saw here today. That's what I'm trying to wrestle with, and I don't know that Lexi, I think adaptive management would probably take a while, and I don't know what we get from that. But no, I've liked what I saw here today. This is fantastic.
Josh, the one question I always have when engaging rulemaking is, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And, I understand that EMA calls out tethered logging. If I recall correctly, an acceptable response to that is that a rule may not be required. And so here, again, I think most of this is being done under a plan for alternate practice. I would be in some ways interested in the department's take on, is there a problem? Like, I haven't heard one today, and if it's not, I mean, there's lots of attributes about forestry that we don't regulate, right? Like, it's because there's no problem. And so I honestly, like you, Ben, I don't know for sure, but before we're going to embark on like a formal rulemaking exercise, I need some help defining the problem statement in the first instance, and I don't feel like we've seen that today.
Thanks. I only heard a bit of what you had to say, Josh. I was back there and you were talking that way, so. But the gist of it, I think, is I don't see a problem either. And I'm really curious about why we would want to go through rulemaking. The tool is the tool, and it works well. And I think that's pretty clear. And it provides a lot of flexibility and a lot of safety, so I'm really struggling with where's the there. The tool, in my mind, is fine. It's how we use the tool. That's where I have some concerns. And we can talk about that later on in future board meetings, but I think some of the implementation that I'm seeing could benefit from a lot more flexibility on the landscape than what I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, I mean, the education part for me is like, oh yeah, sorry, yeah. Like, there's outcome-based rules already about, to my recollection, I'm not a forester, but there's, you know, scour and, you know, scarring on the landscape and stuff. If there are other things we're missing that, you know, are standing out to you guys is something that we would need to specifically address. And maybe it's just a function of moving the plan for alternate practice into rule. You know, maybe that's what the objective is. But beyond that, I just haven't seen the need.
I'm agreeing with most of the board members here, and I agree with that. You know, why does it need to be an alternative practice? You know, particularly in light of a couple of things that I'm hearing today. You know, one is that this is a more expensive way to log, but two, we can't get enough people to come out and do traditional logging, and it's a lot less safe, and this is way more safe. So probably we're going to see a whole lot more of logging being done this way in the future, and so I think it would be smart to not be dealing with it as an alternative practice. But so that's my 2 cents.
Did we miss any of the board members? All right. Well, I appreciate that input. That will help us frame up what part of the staff work we focus on for the next step in the board meeting. So I think that shares enough perspective that we can bring something back and look at how we may address this through the process and see how we address the statutory requirement to at least consider this. So thank you. I didn't know if anybody else, Seth, or anybody had closing comments as we head out.
On behalf of the landowner community, I just say thank you for coming. We really appreciate the opportunity to bring the Board of Forestry out, show you private forest working lands in the process of working, and we're very proud of what we do, and glad you could make it out here and see what we do. So appreciate it. On behalf of Starker and Weyerhaeuser, thanks for joining the tour, and safe travels.